This conference will now be recorded.
That was just low, so I think we're good to go.
All right, welcome everybody to the meeting of the Environmental Advisory Council. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First order of business is approving the minutes from both March and April, since we didn't have time to approve the March minutes at the April meeting. So I make a motion to pass both the March and April minutes. If anybody would like to second that. Seconded by Sarah. All right. Chris.
Good, thank you.
All right, next agenda item is we have a guest this evening, Fred, who has a pretty interesting story to tell. He'd like to share with us about, I guess, some of your personal observations as they relate to the effects of climate change in the local environment.
Yes.
Many, many years.
I don't think we can use those words anymore, though. Climate change.
Wait till he hears new title for the book.
And you are?
My name is Sarah Seifel.
Is that Karen?
Sarah.
Sarah. Marie.
I'm Derek. Derek?
Okay. Yeah, okay. All right.
And then we usually have one more member, Mark, and then I think we potentially have an application in. I don't think that they've interviewed yet.
Is it Emily?
It's not Emily. Well, I don't know, but ask her.
Well, I thought
Then we'll have
she-
6 and we won't be able to.
Exactly. So Emily needs to join so that we can have odd numbers for
Write her
voting.
down.
Because we're always so divided.
Yes.
Yeah, I know, we really are not, I know, right?
Well, my term ends in December, so I'll be leaving.
No way.
Brexit.
No way.
It's finished.
Sorry, no.
So if I may introduce our speaker here, we know that we sent out the open space survey, and I received a call from Fred here about the survey. He had some questions about that, and we got to talking a little bit, and he could tell that I think I might have had an interest in the environmental field, and he shared a little bit about his own experience as a longtime resident of the township and what he's done with his own yard and some of the research. So Fred's book, he has published a book called Anticipation. I'm going to share it here. And I apologize. I really wanted to have a copy of the book here for you all to see. But I checked it out at the library. So his book is available right here at the Parkland Community Library, Anticipation. He told me about it. He said, oh, it's over there at the library. You can go check it out. I walked in. I knew where sort of the environmental section was. And I'll tell you, Fred, it did not take me long to find it because it's about yay thick. I saw it immediately as I walked in, and I committed to it. So I started it, and I think I told you I'm on chapter July. So, but you can explain a little bit more about that. But so if you go to check it out at the library, it's still out probably for a few more weeks. I'll see how much I can get through it. But maybe I can get the cliff notes from Fred.
For Fred, I'm guessing from the topic, the sales of the book have not made you independently wealthy, and
He just loves Southwood on that.
oh my.
But yeah, so I pulled it up. It's available on Amazon, and I think you're doing some changes with the publisher and potentially considering changing the name.
I changed the title to Trends Due to Climate Change.
Okay.
And it has a different cover on it.
Mhm.
And I've updated the charts. I'll show you the charts, but the book has 300 charts in it
Wow, okay.
and 300 photographs in it, all in the backyard. All right. So,
just give me 1 second, I'll pull up the PowerPoint. And just so you're aware, we don't have anyone online, so it's just us here.
So I've been in South Whitehall for 56 years. Okay, so I came in 1969. And when I first started, I lived on Canal Circle. Know what that is?
Exactly.
It's on the other side of 22, about a half mile down. You know that big brick colonial home that looks like a Williamsburg house?
on Springhouse
on
Road.
Springhouse Road.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I live back in there,
Oh,
okay? And so, I'm a retired engineer and I'm a master gardener. All right.
See, I was gonna ask about engineer. When you said 300 charts, you were like,
Yeah,
you're speaking my language.
you're on.
All right. All right. So, since we have a small group here, you can ask questions as I go along.
All right, thank you.
So the subject is phenology, and most of us don't know what that means at all. But it means the study of life, the cycle of life outside. So I started in March because that's when life renews outside. So I study the flowers, the birds, the insects, everything outside. Okay. All right. So that's what it was like when I started. It was the Canals Farm. They were some of the founders here back in the 1700s. And the farmer wanted one road named after him in development. That's how I got Canal Circle. All right. So it was basically a potato farm. It had no trees, right? Very few insects. That's good. There was no squirrels, no birds except pheasants, bobwhite. But basically that was it. And so I had to go to the local quarry at the time. You can't do that anymore. And I got 11 tons of rocks and you'll see the gardens. So that's what it looked like. Okay, go to the
Fred, how big of a property are we talking about?
3/4 of an acre.
Okay.
Yep.
That's beautiful.
And that's what it looks like now.
Wow.
Wow.
Jeez.
Okay, go to the next one. And that's what it looks like now also.
Wow. I'm gonna have you come build walls at my house.
It took a long while to learn how to put up a stone wall without Mother Nature kicking it all the time. Took years and years to learn.
Yeah.
Yep. And the little pond there is 3 feet deep. And every once in a while, I get the great blue heron comes in and wipes it out. Yeah. Okay. So, go to the next one. So this is the mean temperature. Now, you have the wind and the rain and the snow, but temperature really has the most effect on everything we do outside. Okay. The mean temperature is the temperature you get on your PP&L bill. All right. They take the high and low each day and they get the average and they do it for the whole month. And so this is 20, well, this is almost 30 years, from 1992 to now. And you see how it goes up and down like a sawtooth? Well, I put in the trend line, that red line. And what that shows is that in March, the mean temperature has gone up 6 degrees. That's a lot. That's the climate change. All right? Okay.
Fred, could you talk a little bit, just for everyone to be aware that the data shown here, this isn't data that you pulled off of a source. This is data you collected over a period of time at your house. This is.
Well, this is the PP&L bill.
Oh, this is actually the PP&L bill. Okay,
Yeah,
I
this is the
thought
bill.
that was just a reference.
We all have that, so you can't say, well, it's Fred's bill. This is what's going on in the valley.
Right.
Yep, okay. All right. So I take every month except December, the temperature has gone up, and that's how much they've gone up. You see the March here, 6 degrees. Everyone's gone up except December. It's gone down. Why? I don't know, but that's what it shows. All right. Go to the next one. So then at the end of the year, I get all the mean temperatures of the month, add them together, divide by 12, and I get the mean temperature of the year. And that's what that shows. So in 30 years, the valley has gone up 3 degrees. That is a lot. I think you might agree with that one. Yeah, that's an awful lot. A lot of us are not even aware of that. We hear what's going on in the United Nations and such. This is the valley. That's what's happening. That's climate change.
And you can feel it.
Pardon?
You can feel it.
Oh, yeah,
If you're
yeah.
outside, I can tell.
Yeah,
No, no.
all right, go on. This is last year, the rain, okay? And so you see January and March is pretty good, and you can see the drought starting in August. How we're down, down, down. So what's been happening in the past couple of years, we're getting these heavy rains in the spring. And the trees form their canopy. But they're getting heavy canopy account of all the rain. All right? So what happens in around September, we get the drought type season, and the trees cannot sustain all the leaves. And that's why in September you get this brown leaves coming down. It's not fall, but the trees are saying, I've had enough, and they drop their leaves. And then we get fall afterwards. Okay. All right. So here's the annual rain. So basically we get 45 inches. So even though we have the ups and downs over 25 years here, basically it's staying the same. And this is a good one. This is what's happened in March, the snow in March. So if you remember back in the 90s, we used to have snow every Wednesday, week after week, every Wednesday. And so it was high. And now we're down to, but then if you remember, I showed you March temperature went up 6 degrees. No snow. So that's what's happening. But another phenomenon is happening. You see the tall peaks there? You got the tall peak, and the next year is down to nothing. Now, why that is happening, but it seems every time I'm getting a peak, the next year, it's not months, but a year later, it's down to nothing. Yeah. Again, this is the climate change.
I'm most sad about that one. Our kids don't know what
No.
snow is.
No. All right. So this is birds. This is all birds. And what I've done here, again, it's 20 some odd years. It has the months. So I go by color. And so this is a number of species. So the orange is the lowest and the purple is the highest in a given month. So if you just like stand back and just look at the colors, you can see how it changes. In April, the red, and September, October, where you see the purple and the red, that's migration. Yeah, that's the migration which is happening. All right. And you see,
So if you would explain your colors a little bit more for me.
okay, sure. The orange is from 13 to 20 species.
Okay, so we're
Okay.
talking species. Okay,
This is species, the number of species in that particular month.
okay.
Yellow, 20, you say go to purple is 40, 45. Yeah.
If the ones that it says you've observed them at your property.
Yes. Yeah. So again, you stand back and look at the colors, and you can see what's going on. Yeah. This is a different way of presenting rather than the charts. Yeah.
But it would seem overall you're seeing fewer species today than you did 20 years ago.
It depends on what the incident though. What's happened there over 30 some odd years, in my backyard, I've observed 80 some odd species.
Yeah.
Over a period of time. We have lost 13 species in that same period of time.
Okay.
But we gained 13 species. Different type of account of the birds are moving north. Yeah.
But just seeing, I mean, just kind of eyeballing, it seems like there's more yellows and oranges at the bottom of the chart than at the top,
Yeah.
which would suggest fewer species overall.
Overall, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, especially I can see a huge change in October, but then I'm looking at September and November, so I was wondering if you would see a change in that almost shift down, kind of in line with what you're talking about in the season change. So the migration season changing, that maybe the birds are migrating a little later. I'm wondering if you
Some of
saw
them
any
are
of
much
that.
earlier, so, yeah. It depends on what month you're in
Yeah.
and what species, yeah. All right. So here is from May to June, the migration. And you see we are getting many more birds. Yeah. And it's pretty much a steady line going up. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. It's good and bad because what's happening, you probably heard about this, is that the plants are coming out earlier. The insects are coming out earlier. So the birds which are migrating, when the time they get here, there's no food.
Yeah, that's
That's
critical.
the backfire of it.
Yeah, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's critical.
And the canopy, that's when just trees get all their leaves. And I'm the one that's watching all the time, okay? So over the period of time, we've gained 2 weeks for canopy to be completed. Otherwise, we're planting earlier. And if you go to the next one, in the fall, the leaves are dropping 2 weeks later.
Yeah, they
So we almost gained 4 weeks of agriculture in the same period of time. So I go to this, I call up the township, I say, don't stop picking up leaves in November. Please go to December. Yeah. All right. And this is when you get peak color of the leaves, you can see it's changing also. It's getting later. Yeah. All right. So I was speaking to Chris. We don't know exactly what's going to happen yet, but my neighbor and myself would stop cutting the lawn in a certain by 100 by 100 area. I want to see from an environmental standpoint what happens as far as the birds and insects. We're just letting the grass grow. Yeah, I'm just interested in what's happening in there. So then, of course, the other thing we discussed, if you're going to cut a tree, plant a tree. And I don't know what the township can do about that. I would like to see something like that.
Plant native.
Unless it's in the right of way, we really don't have much.
Yeah, so I think as far as presentation, I think you're wrapped up with presentation, and these are kind of 2 discussion points. But before we get into this, does anyone else have questions on some of the research or Fred's book or anything like that? And then we can kind of talk about some of these things. I think Fred and I had a good conversation, but want to kind of get the board's feel. But any questions on his research?
Super excited to read your book. I think I'm really excited to be able to read your book. I'm really excited to meet you. It's exciting to meet other people who are excited and passionate about this. And clearly, if you've been doing this for 30 years, that's amazing. So to keep up with that. So thank you. This is great.
I just wanted to make you aware of what's actually happening in the valley.
Mm-hmm.
Did they write an article about you and your research for the Parkland Press?
Yes, they have.
I thought so. I read that.
Oh,
So I
okay.
think, yeah. So I was thinking, is this the same guy? Yeah, because I read that.
That'd be eerie if there were 2
Yeah,
in
it
the
would.
township
It would be.
at the same level.
Well, what's funny is, I don't remember seeing a picture of you in that article, but I'm pretty sure they had pictures of your gardens and that type of thing. So, I'm assuming it was you.
Yes, it was I, yeah. I'm having another book published in about 6 months. I called The Lifestyle of Backyard Birds Due to Climate Change. It's just on birds, yeah. And it gives what happened. I take each bird species and I put a little story of what's happening to them, yeah, and how they eat, and when they eat, and how they drink, and what manners they have at the feeders with each other and such, and who kicks who out of the feeders,
Right.
that type of thing. Yeah.
Have you compared your temperature data to like National Weather Service data and so official records? Have you had?
No, that would be a lot to do.
Yeah.
It depends on where you're doing it also. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, like from, ABE or whatever, where the
Well, I
official
mean-
recording station, right?
I
So,
record what's in the morning call. They have the high and low every day.
Yeah.
Previous day, I have that, yeah.
okay, all right. Does that compare?
Somehow,
with-
it's very hard to compare that to the mean temperature because you have to take them and add them and divide them and
Yeah,
such.
right.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Mhm.
I mean, it's just your numbers are so extreme that I'm just wondering how they compare to, a broader,
Well, I have to say,
a regional
how
kind of.
broad is broad, you know?
Right.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Do you know where PPL gets their numbers from? The ones you charted?
No. And they might get it from the morning call also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The weather service.
Weather
Yeah.
Service, Mount Holly. I guess Mount Holly is the one that does all the
Yeah.
recording and all that.
Yeah.
So I found it very interesting and very helpful to kind of look at, for lack of a better word, climate change, but climate shifts, I think, is now sort of the word I want to use based on some of your narrative in the book. I like how you referred to it as this, and I'm imagining in my head, this seasonal cyclical change. And for many years we were used to almost 4 quadrants of a season. And I think you described in your book, it's not a matter of things going away or necessarily there's evidence of increased storms and droughts and so forth, but you describe it as, like, I think you said winter has less time to do winter things. And I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it, because I think of, in this cyclical seasonal change where we have the summer extending so much further along, it's almost like that is a way for me to think about talking to someone in very simple terms of, when you have the summer of the peaks of droughts and the peaks of high temperatures that we may have been used to 30 years ago, now the summer is so much longer that those high temperatures stretch out many, many days. And in the winter time, we may have had lots of storms and lots of blizzards, but it seems very condensed, so much more intense. And I just think that's fascinating, and I can see a very nice sort of visual behind that of kind of the shifting of those almost equal quadrants to maybe now longer in the summer months and shorter in the winter months.
Well, the one thing I found in data, if I only look at 5 years and try to make a conclusion, that's wrong. Because instead of going up this way, because after 5 years, it might go down the other way. So that's why I'm glad I have 30 years of data and get a much broader picture of what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, the challenge for a group like ours is, a lot of people who cares,
Hmm.
right? I mean, so what? It's, there's 5 more days of summer and 5 fewer days of winter, right? I mean, the implications of climate change are so much greater than that, that, I think we run the risk that if we don't really tie climate change to the real impacts, that people are not going to be motivated to really do anything about it.
Mm-hmm. I think hazard mitigation planning is such a key focal point for the extreme end of why some of this matters. And that really prompted me to sort of think about it's not, because oftentimes you'll hear the argument of, we've always had these types of storms. It's like, well, now you have a lot more of it condensed in a short amount of time, and that also has impacts when it compounds.
Right, but we don't live in Tornado Alley, we're not on the seacoast, right? So the weather implications of climate change aren't as dramatic here as they are in a lot of other parts of the country, right? So I think that becomes a difficulty in getting people motivated to really care about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see from the climate study with the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, talking about some of the at-home impacts from that. And I don't know how much they focused on that more. I think it was more just the data.
Yeah.
Less so what those changes.
Yeah.
do.
How do you feel climate change, right? I don't think they've really looked at that in the study. So.
But that could be something that this group wants to look at in the future, and that could be, you know, the focus of the plan. It's a lot of work to get all that data. Well, a lot of that data has been, a lot of the data has been collected and vetted and sort of summarized through the regional climate action plan, and then we have local examples here, obviously. So maybe the next
I mean,
step.
personally, I don't know how anybody could, really look at the empirical evidence and deny that there's climate change.
It's bewildering.
I mean, but a lot of people do, right? Because
Scientists don't.
scientists don't.
No, scientists don't.
Well, 3% of scientists do.
I thought it was down to one, but.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, just one, just one.
Like 1%, but yeah, still, it was
There's an
low.
article in today's paper about how it's affecting children in one call, the asthma.
No, right.
I think to take what you've been doing and then you have to kind of touch on what you were saying, and maybe that's an initiative that we could maybe think about long-term or whatever when we have time. But I think that's great to be able to ask people, how do you feel that it's affecting you? But the answer is going to be the same problems. They're not being affected by it. I think if we could somehow say, this is what it's going to look like in 5 years. This is what it's going to look like if we continue on this train. This is what it's going to look like in 10 years. So what does that mean? What does 3 more, percentage or 3
Yeah.
more degrees
Yeah.
mean to you at home? So I always have felt like unless it affects people personally, like slaps them in the face, they're not going to care. So I mean, maybe if we were to have time and have a thought of how we can get through to people, I don't want to be like all doomsday about it, but I mean, I think to kind of say, this is what's going to happen. Like, because right now they may not feel it at all. So again, they're not going to care, but you're not going to have water in the summer sometimes. We might have to turn it off.
Yeah.
But one of my real concerns in having, looked at these issues for quite a while now is that I'm becoming very concerned that government is not really equipped to handle problems that have a duration, a time span that's more than 3 years, maybe 5 years. I mean, if, you hear about all this, net zero by 2050, I think that's all just BS. But that's companies just saying, we'll deal with it in 2045, right? And or we're on the pathway to net zero, right? Which again is BS for most of these companies, because I don't think they really, I mean, you can just see it now the stuff I look at, so many companies, so many governments are peeling back their initiatives to move toward net zero because it's inconvenient to do it, right? And you've got vested interests that don't want to do it, and so it becomes, unless there's a groundswell of support from the public to address this, I don't think we can count on government to come save us or the industry to come save us,
Or
right?
have our best interest.
Because they don't have our best interests at heart when it comes to this issue. So,
And when you say,
Go ahead.
when you say government, you're talking federal. Is that what you're really thinking about, Frank? Are you thinking about?
well, I think the federal government is the only place where you can address these kind of issues, right?
Right, but that's what you're saying. They're not prepared. They're not gonna be the ones that are gonna save us all.
I mean, even look at the last administration, right? I mean, they put all these green energy initiatives in place, which is fabulous, but we still drilled more oil and natural gas under Biden than under any other president, right? So.
And the timelines they gave was like, oh, we'll give you 25 years for 5% or 10%, to meet a 10% goal.
Yeah.
And we can do better than that.
But it has to be a priority, right? I mean, for the majority of the population, it has to be a priority, and we're nowhere near there now.
The drought was scary for people. I feel, the drought.
Yeah.
The drought was scary because
Oh, yes.
it lasted for so long. And it's not the first time.
No.
From my perspective, it's not the first time.
I can remember when it was proposed to put the dam in up the Delaware.
Delaware.
Remember that?
Yes, I do remember it.
You should have put that in.
Oh, really, you think?
Well, look what's happening to our cities.
Right.
And now we have another drought with more people.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't thinking ahead.
That's very interesting. Yeah, because I know there was a lot of pushback on that dam.
Oh, dams do bring, there's pros and cons, I suppose, to
There's
dams.
pros and cons. Yep. I'm like a little kid with it, so I want to see if my charts are going to go up.
Right.
I don't want them to, but
Yeah,
But I think it has to really, there are certain situations that really have to hurt people.
mhm,
I just working in sustainability, I'm no expert by any stretch. But when I talk to people, what I am hearing is they are overwhelmed. They get so much information.
mhm.
It's kind of like, I don't know what to do with any of it, so I'm not doing anything because I got to get my kid to school. The school is requiring this of us. I have to do this project. Now something in my house broke. I got to deal with that. Now the car has to go in for repairs, and now I got to go to the grocery store. Okay, now my kid's sick, so I'm running there. I'm sure you can
I
relate.
feel like all that happened to me today.
Right. Exactly.
All the time.
Yeah, and so people are kind of like, think about it tomorrow. I'm done now.
Easier.
I'm exhausted.
Easier.
I'm done. I can't think about any more. And then if I do, what do I do about it? And I think a lot of people are thinking, but I'm just one person. So I think we need this group, a concerted effort because everybody by themselves feels, I can't do anything by myself. Who else is doing something? So maybe that's us. I don't know.
I hear that discussion quite often, what you just said.
Mhm.
We do that happens on country levels. Like I've talked to people less environmentally conscious than me. Like, why don't we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions? What about China? Like, that's just their response. So it's like
Deflection.
they don't want to do anything because other people aren't doing it, which I find ludicrous because we still share a planet.
Mhm.
And then to Frank's point before, with the federal government, I work for the federal government, and part of a 5-year review for our sites. Every 5 years, we go back and look, and then one of the Biden's executive orders was we actually had to evaluate climate resilience, I think is the term we use now, and that got wiped out. So it's like we have hazardous waste in the ground that may be released because of climate issues, and now no one cares. Like, I'm really bitter, especially working for the federal government in this position, so I'm going to limit what I say, but it is ridiculous. Actually, regarding that, the one site we have in town with the 5-year review, we should probably see if they do a climate resiliency on that.
Yeah, we can ask DEP
Yeah,
because I think that they initiate. I don't know how much EPA. I think it doesn't go DEP and then to EPA with that site.
it should go to both, but I'm not sure.
Well, we have better local contacts at DEP.
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, also, I could,
Cedar Crest Boulevard?
no, it's over by Warfield.
What are we, what are we talking?
Oh, it's public knowledge. You can look up South Whitehall surplus sites and it'll be there. It's a former landfill.
Oh, the landfill is what you're talking about.
Yeah, on Northfield Road.
Oh, Northfield Road, yeah.
Yeah, they're almost finished.
Right.
If I may bring, this is a great conversation, but kind of bring it down from the global perspective to the local perspective. I think this is, it's challenging and overwhelming to think about how much we can impact, but that's where I'm also grateful that we have this group. And I think a little bit of change goes a long way on a local level. I like that Fred brought up these two points, and I think these are things that are important to think about at a local level, and goes back to our slow but I think important progress in making small changes on a local level, either for continuing to educate people or inspire people to make better choices, or a little bit of having some regulation behind it. So as Fred said in his first comment here, he's looking at letting his property grow fallow, excuse me. But we also have a township highways and grass ordinance that prohibits that. So one of the things we talked about in the landscapes plan is a way to properly combat that or ensure that the intent of naturalization isn't hindered by ordinances that are not necessarily intended to prohibit that, but to prohibit neglect and so forth. In the landscapes plan, we talked a little bit about either a certification program or something that we can ensure that someone in, say, Fred's position, who you have a very clear intent on what you want to do there, and that should be supported, but it also needs to be identified, I think, to protect you from your neighbors and from the township and code enforcement. So I'd love to start to revisit that, and I'd love to get some thoughts on that from all of you about what the easiest path forward would be. I think just a simple certification program that says this is going to be naturalized habitat, and maybe think about what some of the criteria for that could be for
I
us.
haven't thought initially, but if that, not to cut you off of that.
Yeah, sure.
But if somebody has to do a certification program, I'm not gonna do it.
And that's what I'm wondering is, where's that line of getting the recognition
Right.
from the township?
But maybe somebody, so just a thought is maybe we just make the guidelines in doing it really easy. Like, again, I'm just making this up. Like if you want to make an area of your yard go free, which we do in our front yard, but we'll call it like I put a frame around it.
Mhm.
So I mow around it.
Yeah.
So it has a frame around it. So it
Yeah.
looks like it's like I intended to do that.
Mhm.
But it's a big area that's gone naturalized, but
Yeah.
maybe don't let it go up to the road. Maybe
Right.
don't let it
Right.
go up to your property line. Frame it. But you could, I'm sure you could think of a better word, but
That's a good word.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we'll go
I
with
like
that
that.
word. Frame it. And then, I think if you just make it simple for people and not any harder than that, because just getting people to want to let an area of their yard go natural is a big deal for people to do.
You're pushing that out west to the homes out west.
But because there's no water to sustain the grass, right? Or am I
A lot of
thinking?
homes now are built without grass, without lawns, right? I mean, like
You know,
stones or
They
whatever.
pointed out
Oh,
that
right,
the
yeah.
the large lawnmowers that people have now are crushing the eggs of the insects.
Oh, wow.
Oh, right,
Huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then the reverse is, I had a comment today, well, if you're doing that, you're gonna get more ticks and fleas.
But you just gotta get some chickens, they'll eat them up.
But that's very interesting though, too, because your intention is, you're not gonna walk through that grass.
No.
I mean,
Not a regular path, but I walk through it just for observation.
for observation, yeah. And maybe maybe we should be recognizing individuals in the township who say, you're an engineer, you're a master gardener, you've been doing this for 30 years, and you're like, I have a goal here. My goal is to collect this data to inform people, to inform myself. So maybe that individual, gets some type of a certificate from the township, where the township says, and I'm just making this up, for the next 3 months, this individual, Fred, is doing this research on his property, and the township recognizes this, or the township is aware.
They'll come plow your driveway.
But
That'll be the
to
first one.
But to Sarah's point, we can't ask Fred to fill out a 30-page application.
No,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Or even a one page, I'm
Yeah.
telling you, it's not gonna.
Yeah,
I think
I mean, what I was gonna say, and I'm hearing everybody say it, is whatever we ask people to do, it's gotta be easy.
Like,
We can't ask people
stupid
to-
easy,
Yeah, you can't ask people to completely upend their lives
Yeah.
for something that, isn't gonna impact them tomorrow.
I mean, can you even make enforcement, do you know how many people are cited under that ordinance?
I don't know. It's a good question, but I think so what we would also need is very clear and direct guidelines so that when it gets to a code enforcement violation, that doesn't come across my desk. So it could be someone who calls our code enforcement officer and says, my neighbor has high weeds. He goes out, he sees it, he addresses it, cited, or it's, address it in 90 days. It's not actually cited. That could happen all throughout the summer, honestly,
Right.
probably multiple times a day. So I think the for me, there's two goals of one, ensuring that we have clear direction so that someone who is doing something intentional isn't in trouble with the township, and two, encouraging what you guys are talking about, and that there's a benefit in having some education behind that. You saw some of the information that Ally put together for the Earth Day event. I mean, we have the resources absolutely for some educational material of, hey, here's what naturalizing your yard looks like, and here's some great materials and examples of that. And I think part of that is just that outreach. But without having some either guidelines or recognition for the township to say this property is okay for this reason, it's gonna be tough on our end to allow it and encourage something that.
So what are you saying, Chris, that the board has to be involved in this, or what are you saying?
No, I mean,
Who recognizes it besides us?
code enforcement.
Code enforcement,
Code
okay, because I'm not sure what you meant, Frank, like an application, what we're talking about here, in order to get the township to recognize.
Well, so I don't know. I mean,
To waive it.
To waive
waive it, yeah.
People who are very motivated, like Fred, he doesn't want 30 pages, but you're motivated enough that if I would assume if the township gave you, said, okay, you're motivated, you're doing this project, give us your name, your address, and what is your intention here? And how long will you be doing this?
Too much.
Well, I don't think that's too much at all. I think
I know.
I think,
disagree.
what do you think? If they gave you one page and that's what they asked?
I feel very good about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Take a load off my mind.
But I think there's a difference in someone like Fred, who's been very focused on his yard, has very clear intent for 30 years, and Sarah, who has the intent for, you want to leave an area of your yard naturalized. You don't have the time in the background or the.
I don't have the time to call the hairdresser. So
Yeah.
let alone- you know what I mean? So,
Yeah, so-
I mean, I don't need
So
to,
one page,
you know,
you wouldn't fill out one page, so. With your
not
name and
only would
address.
I not think that if that would exist to even happen, I would think, hey, if I wanted to grow my yard long and sit in spot, minus the ordinance, I would think I'd wanna do it. But I would wanna be responsible about it and not make it, keep it friend, keep it friend. So, no, yeah, it would be too much.
And this isn't something I'm
Because-
looking for an
but I-
answer today. It's
Yeah.
literally just Fred brought it up, and it is something I'd love to get back to. So food for thought in future discussions of, I think if it can be simple enough, and if something it's even maybe potentially involving this board, if it's gonna be, I think it'd be, if there's a criteria, and maybe part of that is, either this board approving that criteria, because we're not gonna have a lot of them, or having, designating what that criteria would be, but something to think
So
about.
just thinking forward with the form, so let's say there was a form. It would have to be, in my mind, like, so now I have the form, do I have to print it out? If I have to print it out, and I'm gonna send it in, too much. It's gotta be either I can do it online and submit it and I'm done.
Yeah, we
If
have,
I have to print it out and send it,
Right, then you will want
I
to.
just won't.
But online, you would be
I
more
would say that's the
agreeable to.
easiest way to do a one-page form. Or at the very least, just having the criteria listed very plainly, that this is what, if you wanna do this, this is what you have to do.
Mhm.
and this
At
is
the very
something that
least.
very much involves other departments and other staff too, because again, like I said, it's not anything under my jurisdiction or my department's jurisdiction. It's under code enforcement. There's also a level of involvement probably with public works to an extent. And it depends on where the calls are coming in as well, because it's oftentimes a call, hey, my neighbor's grass is too high. And usually that goes to the code enforcement officer, but even if there's a level of making sure that whoever's receiving those calls, and, oh no, they're part of this certified habitat program and they're okay with this, and if you have a question or a complaint, you can direct it to so-and-so.
Or maybe depending on how large your-
Oh,
And gave a prize to, this committee could go look at all the naturalized areas. give a
I think that
prize.
if you guys would like to do that, I think that's cool. I know the Emmaus Garden Club does that every year, and I think it's pretty
It'd be
easy.
a way to publicize the idea that we want to promote this, right?
yeah.
And then we could do
I
like
like
an expert spotlight in our newsletter
Mhm.
and put pictures of that person's yard and.
Yeah.
But
Tell all the slumlords to stop mowing and then say they're letting it grow natural.
Well, and that's why the
They have to
criteria is so important.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
I like the idea of framing it. I think having some sort of intent.
Yes.
And
Oh, that
And
was
that's
my thought before I
where-
forget. I'm so sorry. I
Mhm,
will
go
forget
ahead.
if I don't spit it out. Thank you, and I'm sorry. That is depending on the size of your yard. You know, you only have a quarter of an acre, you can't let the whole thing go. Maybe you're only allowed, you know, maybe we break it down and like, this is the size of your yard, this is how much you can let go naturalized, you
A
know?
proportional sort of,
Right,
yeah.
I mean, cause then, you know, the slumlords won't just.
I mean, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, but
Right.
then you get people who could be planting invasive species, letting them grow wild. Like, what if someone's like, I want to see what a bamboo forest does in my backyard?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And then
No
all of a
bamboo.
sudden pandas start showing up and
And I think that's where getting some guidance on what would be appropriate. You know, is it you have to have a certain number of species or diversity of species? You have to do something that's intentionally planted or so forth. And so something to think about there. And I also want to talk to Ally about it as well. I think our members from the Landscape and Shade Tree Commission can certainly be helpful with that. But exactly, it can't just be. I think there's a level of just letting the grass grow is probably not enough, even if it is in a small area, but maybe planting something as well to get that.
Cause the two things that'll come in first are the Bradford Fair and the autumn olive.
Mhm.
Those will come in like the first year one. So maybe instead of saying what you have to plant is maybe is, hey, if you see this, just rip it out.
Yeah, we do have I guess we follow the state's noxious
Yeah,
weed
right. Yeah.
list. Yeah. This is all great. I love the idea of the contest. If you guys
Yeah,
are
that's a
open
good
to
one.
that. Because I was thinking, do they come in and talk to this board? But I think having this board kind of sponsor that contest could be very, very cool. And
I would love that. That would be fun.
I think people get excited.
Yeah, then people get excited. How do you feel about that, Fred?
I like that.
You like it?
I think he's vying for an entry into the contest.
Or our group here. You should join our group.
I can give you a volunteer application form.
Are they on the desk out there? Should I
I
go
think
grab
so.
one?
Wait a second.
I don't know. There's a whole lot. I'll get one later. Yeah, because I don't know if they're out in the turns.
Now, wait a second. Yeah, we'll get you in here so fast.
Lock the door.
Yeah.
No, you won't know it hit you.
No, true. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have your thoughts every month. So something to think about, you know, while you're watching your lawn grow.
Yeah. On the idea of cut a tree, plant a
I
native
gladly
tree.
advise you all the information I have. You know.
I doubt that.
Very nice.
I think this is also one, Marie or Sarah, I don't know which one you mentioned, but this is definitely something with the Shade Tree Commission that we follow within the right of way. If you have to remove a street tree, usually it's a 1-for-1 on that. And that's a nice requirement that we have. So every permit that we get for the removal of a street tree is reviewed by me and then staff and public works and so forth. And then we usually look at the spacing allowed and kind of the makeup of the neighborhood and typically require that they then plant another tree that's appropriate for that
Who
area.
plants the other tree?
Everything is on the homeowner. It's on the homeowner to get a contractor to remove it. It's on the homeowner to plant it. And then the comments from our Shade Tree Commission members have been, there's a definite need for better education on how to properly plant a street tree. Not just any old tree, but specifically a street tree. So we're working on updating some of that guidance, and we'd love to maybe do an educational session around that or have something.
That education should also include what you do about sidewalks.
Yeah, so the challenge with our township and street trees is usually the street tree ordinance is very uniform. And this township, being a first ring suburb that has developed over many, many years, you have very different varieties of neighborhoods. Some have sidewalks, some have curving, some don't. Some have a large tree lawn, some have very well planned street trees, some have great sidewalks, but not a great space to put the tree. So it becomes challenging of what is very appropriate for this neighborhood may not be as fair for someone in this neighborhood because you're almost trying to
force a streetscape design that was never intended for that neighborhood.
What I'm talking about is that you get a curb and then you say, okay, 3 feet sidewalk, but the tree grows up to be 4 feet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so now you have raised sidewalks to trip people. And poor trees,
Yeah, the tree's struggling.
Yeah.
so it should be a new ordinance, so I say curb 4 feet. Or else build a sidewalk around it. But it's not right.
We haven't gotten a lot of support in building the sidewalk around. I explored that a little bit. As far as the design, so one of the things we're doing with our transportation plan is we are reclassifying our roadways. So roadways are classified by their functionality, how many cars pass through them on a regular basis. Your larger roads are your arterials. Your collectors usually collect from the neighborhoods or places and put them to the arterials near your local roads. So we're reviewing the current functionality. We haven't updated the functional classifications in probably 15 years or something like that. And on top of that, we're reviewing what would be a good classification of character or surrounding context. So if you live over in the west end of Allentown and just where the township border is almost indistinguishable, very different character of that area compared to if you live even in a development over here, say the Vistas or something like that, or if you live up on Orfield Road. Someone who lives on Orfield Road shouldn't have to follow, or the road shouldn't be designed the same way that the road should be designed in the west end of Allentown. Regardless of functionality, it's a different classification. Sidewalks make sense there, curbing makes sense there. Even your bike pedestrian facilities are different there. So we're using that to hopefully look at some of those landscaping and streetscaping criteria of maybe in some locations wider tree lawns for larger trees, or in tighter areas and more developed continue to have that small tree lawn, but maybe don't require street trees as much, or different types of landscaping, or maybe you can start to integrate some of the green stormwater infrastructure. I think the tree wells are a great example because those work a lot better with the sidewalk. But it's tough. It's tough to plan for everything because it's the township has developed in so many different ways, and I always run into what's fair and equitable to an ordinance and kind of our policy of requiring a 1-for-1 street tree in an area that it doesn't always make sense. And we run into that as well too with the even land development plans. When we review land development plans, sometimes you get a land development up in an area that isn't in a neighborhood, and they're maybe doing something that isn't designed as a neighborhood, but you still want some trees there, but do you want street trees the same way as a small condensed neighborhood?
Bethlehem has some good rules on that.
Bethlehem does. Okay.
Yeah.
I will look into their. I've talked to Allentown's members of their shade tree commission a little bit.
Otherwise, if you're planting a tree under a power line, it has to be a certain type of tree.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
But as far as outside of the right of way, it's a tough one. We don't really regulate private property with tree maintenance. But I think maybe something like we have the what species are not allowed because of the noxious weeds and so forth list, but maybe looking at, I don't know how successful they've been in other municipalities of having a required species list that is not a street tree. Okay.
Especially because some nurseries are still selling like barberry.
Oh, that's coming to an end now, isn't it? I think another year, at the end of this year, they can no longer sell barberry.
Is that true?
Oh, yeah, oh,
that's
yeah,
great.
barberry's off the list. Yeah, they can't sell it anymore, thank goodness. All you have to do is go up to Kohler Ridge that property, oh my God, I've never seen so much escaped barberry.
Oh, really?
And when there was barberry, there were ticks. Because I was on that committee and we went up there. My husband and I went up one Saturday. We've lived on our property, which is wooded, for this point 16 and a half years, but we've worked on it for 20 years. We can count on one hand the number of times we've had a tick on us. He came home, he's in the car, and I'm like, oh my God. I said, you have ticks on you. I mean, we had to take them off of him. Like
Yeah.
5 or 6 ticks on him. But barberry, that's the research they did in Connecticut. And those barberries, because they have so many thorns and all of that type of thing on them,
Mm.
the ticks somehow know this, and they are in those things. And so when they did the research for Lyme up in Connecticut, they took white cloths and drug them over fields where this various vegetation was, and where they had the barberry. My gosh, they were collecting ticks like crazy.
Wow.
So, it's a big, big problem. Yeah, if you look it up, just research it.
They're not allowed to be sold in Pennsylvania now.
Right, that will, I think, is it at the end of this year, or do they have, because they give the nurseries time to move it along, which isn't great.
I
But
don't know the end, but that one's forbidden.
it is now, barberry is
Has
forbidden
It
now.
has been.
Okay, all
But
right.
I don't know if
And
there's.
there's some others also.
Oh, yes, there are, 5-foot parents, so many,
Yeah.
yeah, good. Because barberry, my husband and I have worked to get that out, and that's a bear.
That's a bear and a half.
Yeah, that is a nasty little shrub to
Yeah,
get out.
So is autumn olive.
Yeah, autumn olive,
I mean, my bees love it, but.
yeah, that keeps coming back too, yeah,
Was I
so,
looking up? Oh, yeah, barberry.
yeah, so, but at any rate,
It's
yeah.
pretty though.
Yeah, everything's pretty, but,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and,
And it's, autumn olive smells really nice too.
yeah, see, we're such a rampage, we don't even notice that. My husband sees it, that's leaving, that's gone. Oh, yeah, we don't mess around, it's cruel.
Get a blowtorch.
Yeah, right. I'll tell you what,
That's what they do up in Trexler.
it's, yeah, right.
They
Yeah,
do
yeah,
controlled burns with it,
Yeah,
yeah.
controlled burns, and sometimes it works for some of that stuff, and sometimes it doesn't.
They've been doing a really good job cleaning it out.
Yeah,
there.
good.
I mean, it was.
Well, it's controlled burns, and then they actually get in and they dig out the root system, and yeah. It's
Oh, that's a good way to do
Yeah,
it.
it's a long, tedious
That's
process, but
That's
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, but all very interesting stuff.
That is very interesting about barberry.
No, I'm so glad to hear it. My husband cut down a apron.
Should we,
Yeah, we gotta move on.
I don't think we've
All right.
talked about anything on
We gotta-
Next agenda item, thank you again, Fred, for
Thank you.
sharing your
Wow.
wisdom with us.
You're quite welcome.
Really, really good stuff.
All right, so agenda item number 4, the resource preservation ranking. Chris, you want to give us an update on that?
Yeah, just a quick update. I talked to Frank, and just pretty much with everything going on these days, this is sort of fallen back a little bit. The last meeting we had a good conversation. I have not really had a lot of time to take my notes from that meeting, but I handed out just quickly tonight something I was working on today. I'm working through the data sourcing. I want to really get updated information. A lot of the data sources I had previously, I just want to make sure I have them very clean and clear as to where I'm getting the information for some of the natural resources, so that we can have good metadata for that. Because what I'm thinking is, we talked a lot about the benefits of the resource preservation priorities for kind of our goals for what we want to look to preserve. But then we also talked about the need for additional protections outside of that. Later in the agenda, we'll talk about some of those additional ordinances. But I was thinking it might be helpful for us to identify specific resources on the official map if we will be looking at ordinances that call out specific resources. But I still find value in having that prioritized sort of matrix of, or the high value natural resource land, high value agricultural land, and so forth for our goals and the areas that we want to look and considering what could happen with the open space referendum, if we do start to look at targeting properties to acquire, I think that priority list could be helpful. So I'm thinking it could be still two maps, and this is where I kind of laid out some of the details. So we'll have existing facilities, which talks about all of our infrastructure and so forth. And then to focus your attention on sort of this map 2 and map 3. Sorry. So I'm thinking of, we would list the resources and identify the specific resources depending on which direction we go with the ordinances. Also talk about what the existing public open spaces are. Give that snapshot of what's on the ground at the time. And then the secondary map would be our sort of landscapes preservation goals of the agricultural, natural resource, historic resources, all the facets of the landscapes plan, and then open space as well. So we could choose to maybe, if there's overlap of some of those priority resource areas, potentially choose to identify a couple of priority properties during the official map process, or do that later. It's just an exercise of this group. So something to think about there. Like I said, I'm still trying to source the data to make sure I have everything in there and work on the GIS of that. I just want to give a quick update there. Any thoughts on the idea of having these two avenues of kind of the existing conditions with specific resources called out, and in addition to that, having still the landscape priorities, as we kind of mentioned, it would be those overlapping, where all the overlapping resources are, become sort of our priority swaths of the township to consider for open space preservation.
But identifying them as priorities doesn't really do anything, right, at this point?
No, but it could give some direction to potential acquisitions.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, as we go through the official map, if we want to call that out. We could either leave it as just a priority, and then that potentially could allow us, within the provisions of the official map, essentially, if you have something identified as an area of interest you want, you can put a pause for up to a year of, if there's a land development that comes in or something changes there. I believe you can do that without identifying the specific parcel, as long as you have an area, a specific location identified. For example, we do that right now with our official map. We have the Jordan Creek Greenway buffer.
Right.
And it could be similar to that. We don't identify the specific parcels under that buffer, but if anything comes in under that, we could potentially put a pause on the land development and say, give us a year to negotiate acquiring the property, or in that case, it's negotiating the construction of the trail or an easement for the trail or something.
How much of the high priority open spaces would already fall within the overlay?
The Jordan Valley overlay?
Yeah.
Well, the Jordan Valley overlay is, I would say probably 80 to 90% in what we're looking at. What we're doing with the overlay, though, is it's really just a zoning tool, and it's allowing for, that only deals with land development.
Right.
So unfortunately, if the zoning overlay is the only tool, that means every property within that, if it's going to be protected for open space, has to be developed as well. So it's complementing it with, that's a one tool to handle properties that will inevitably be developed. And the other tool would be direct preservation through the township of being proactive.
I'm just wondering if is it redundant to identify those priority locations if they're already within the Greenway?
Oh, the Greenway one, the one that we have on our official map. Well, we'd be updating the official map, so what's existing goes away. So we could continue to just, are you talking the Greenway example I said of the swath that goes around on the
Yeah.
official map, okay, I thought you were talking about the Jordan Valley zoning overlay that we're
I guess
developing.
I said overlay, but. yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because those are two separate things. The existing, that is for the Jordan Creek Greenway, so really all that is for the trail. And the intent of that is for the trail, and that's just a buffer around the stream.
Okay.
It's a pretty substantial buffer, probably a couple 100 feet, but it doesn't cover everything.
Do we, were you gonna say
No, I was about my
something? Do we put, and by me, we, I don't, collectively in the township, do we put a definition to each of these? So I'm a developer, I'm coming in, so this has been identified as a floodplain. So now
Yes.
these definitions are in place of what you can and can't do.
Yeah, so that's where, when I talk about the data sourcing, I want to make sure that all of our data in there, if we're saying this is identified as a floodplain, if this is identified as a stream, identified as woodlands, that we have the data to back it up. Because right now, what's on the official map, a lot of it, I think, is just sourced to Lehigh Valley Planning Commission from probably the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I don't know, and not to say that that doesn't stand up, but I don't, if you really came into a challenge of a developer saying, well, I don't think there's woodlands there, what is this data source? I think it's always easier just to point to not only a more current data source to see if things have changed, but also to specifically have that information available, almost like a data dictionary or something that would complement the official map to say where we got all of this from. So that's what I'm working on now. Woodlands, for example, I'm looking at the University of Vermont Spatial Lab. They have a really, really robust aerial sourced land cover data set that's down to, I believe, a meter resolution. And it's excellent. And they talk about tree canopy in that. So I'm playing around with that to see, comparing that to some of our woodlands data sources. And I've been kind of talking to some colleagues in that sort of field about what's a good source for woodlands from that. And the University of Vermont data is, it's getting a little older, but when you're talking about woodlands, you're within 10 years. It's better than 200 years. Floodplains are pretty easy because floodplains are very specifically regulated, and they only change if there's a map change. Wetlands, I'm trying to get my information as quickly as I can because I'm not sure what's going to happen to the National Wetlands Inventory, to that data set.
I'm more nervous about that because they're so easily filled in.
Yeah. And I think part of, and Frank, if you're okay transitioning into the next agenda item.
Sure, yeah.
I think part of that is, sorry, I was switching my screen here. For example, something like filling in wetlands or what's required on a federal level for many years was the first and foremost. I think it's helpful to have an additional level of local control. Obviously, we are not all wetland scientists. We don't know everything that's out there, but I think having a reliable data source, having that mapped and included in a process, a public process, a very clear adoption process as the official map goes through, gives us some standing to say we know that there's something here as far as wetlands or woodlands or whatever. And I think having some of those additional resource protection ordinances or updates to ordinances that say, if you have a wetland identified on the property and you come in for a land development, prove to us that it's not a wetland. I think that's a simple thing to do. Instead of us saying it's definitely a wetland, you can't do this, but having that that clear guidance to say, prove to us that that it's not woodlands as we've identified it, and if it is, here's what you need to do: either protect the trees, protect the intact woodlands, and give very clear regulations on that. potentially even if you have to remove trees, we'd like to see trees somewhere else. Cut a tree, plant a tree, sort of thought. What I put together in your packet here, this is just kind of a background summary. I wanted to introduce some of this for you guys to sink your teeth into a little bit over the next coming weeks. I pulled a lot of information from Chester County Planning Commission. Is fantastic. So a lot of this is pulled directly from that. They have a great source of ordinance-related information dealing with different resource protection. And what's on the bottom here, so if you read through this, I encourage you to read through it. These are sort of some of my thoughts compiled with the guidance from Chester County. I think there's different options we can go as far as these resource protection ordinances. The one tool is the official map, which we talked about is really intended more for providing clear what's on the ground and allowing that negotiating time period for acquisition or something like that. I think coupled with that, we want to give clear guidance on how we protect the resources that we find important. We're using the landscapes plan as that guidance. There's within that talks a lot about natural resources, all the things that we've said here. For example, we're not well, we talked about drought, but we're talking more clean water than water supply. So it's not like there's a lot of water supply concerns in our area, and that's a resource that at least wasn't expressed as highly prioritized through the landscapes plan. So we have things like the steep slopes and the woodlands and clean water, wetlands, sensitive habitats. And I think we could go the option of adding specific requirements to the subdivision and land development ordinance, SALDO. What that would do is every time there's a land development that comes in, they have to follow that. And there's a lot of really good examples of SALDO specific items in here, in some of the links in this document. The problem I see with SALDO is that it is only triggered at land development. And waivers are always possible. So if someone comes in and they say, hey, for one reason or another, we don't want to do this, here's our justification why, that requirement can be waived. It's a request to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission usually, they want very clear justification for it before they consider it, and then they recommend it. But I think the SALDO ones are great in the way to be very specific in what you're asking and what someone needs to do. But I think that's also limiting because it's only during the land development process. You can also do a standalone ordinance. There's great examples in here. The Lehigh Valley Planning Commission has put together standalone ordinances dealing with woodland preservation, riparian preservation, steep slopes, I think is another one that's in here. And so what happens with those is you have the township code, which is robust, deals with all kinds of things, code enforcement, subdivision, land development, zoning, noise, all of that kind of stuff. And it would be a standalone section in there that deals specifically with resource priorities. The benefit to that is it's across the board. That's where you can sort of have things that talk about species requirements, and if you don't have those species requirements or what's allowed, maybe that would be a great place to even put that in there to say, here's, naturalized landscaping is allowed, and then that's codified in the ordinance for the code enforcement officer to point to say, well, I'm not going to enforce them. My problem with that, my personal problem with these standalone ordinances is it's a big code. And I'm not sure if everybody who's responsible for looking at the code understands or knows every single piece of the code. So it's not to say that it wouldn't be enforced or it wouldn't be triggered, but you'd almost have to go look for it. And it's not as clear as when a subdivision or a land development comes in, goes direct to the SALDO. They have to follow everything with the SALDO. It's almost like you're pulling from somewhere else to come in for land development. And the same thing for regular property owners, or for anything else that is outside of the land development process. You have to go look for that piece of the code, and that's challenging because it's usually multiple departments that come across something. I think the other option is through zoning. Zoning is tricky because zoning is very specific, but zoning affects the entire township, unless you direct it to a specific location, say the Jordan Valley, or say one zoning district. If you give a geographic distinct boundary for that, and it has to, everything in there follows, that's basically saying, you know, if I want to build something, I have to follow this criteria in this zoning district. If I want to do something with natural resources, I would have to follow this criteria in that zoning district. But I think you could do something across the board. Personally, I like the zoning option because I found a great example in here that it was actually all of the resources together. The other downside of the previous example of a specific part of the code, some of the examples that we have, they might be a riparian ordinance or a woodlands ordinance, and you have kind of these distinct resources. I saw an example here that was a natural resource overlay district, and it combined all of the resources they were trying to protect into one district and had specific criteria for that. And it was interesting because it was talked about as an overlay that basically, if you have an identified resource through something like the official map, then that criteria applies. So if you have a wetland on your property, have to follow the wetland pieces of the zoning ordinance. If you're going to develop the wetland, if you're going to do anything to the wetland, here's what you can't do to the wetland. So lots of options. Certainly not looking for any answers or response. Just wanted to kind of introduce this stuff to you. And
it sounds like difficulty in developing would go in the order you discussed it, though. Putting something in Saldo would be easier than standalone ordinances, which would be easier than putting it in zoning. Right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
But also the effectiveness is the same then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Timing too. The direction we go with zoning, zoning change is very cumbersome. If it's within an existing piece of our zoning ordinance, there's often a lot more requirements than something new that would go across the whole township. But yes, probably I think you have the backing of the municipality's planning code in the zoning ordinance being able to help direct the intent for protection of resources within a municipality. So I think there's a lot of standing there. I think you have violations enforced by the zoning officer is helpful there. And I think it covers the land development end because anytime someone comes in with a land development, they have to comply with zoning. So they would comply with the underlying zoning district that dictates what they can build, but they would also potentially have to comply with the overlay of the natural resources and so forth, if there are some there. It's a lot to kind of look into. So
I guess I'm wondering, is there a crawl before you walk approach where maybe we could do something with Saldo, like that's probably the low-hanging fruit, that most of these instances are going to be triggered by development anyway, and then, you know, maybe work toward zoning changes.
I think if I could go a step back, what I would really love from this group is intent and how detailed. So regardless if it's maybe the first two options, something like Saldo or a standalone ordinance, I want to know how detailed do you think we need to be specifically in this township on some of the requirements. there are some great requirements in here that I think are very specific, but I'll say I think it would be a little bit of overreach in South Whitehall Township, especially some of the woodland preservation type of items where we don't have old growth forests, we don't have um, uh, robust areas where you have a lot of individual tree lots and so forth like that, where you have people who are doing work on their trees. Marie's probably the only property owner managing her own forest. So I think as you look through some of the examples, I want to get a sense from you all of what's a good level of regulation that we're shooting for with some of this stuff with respect to what we've heard from the landscapes plan and the resources that we have, and that we can maybe start to lay some of that out. And then the secondary piece would be, where does it go?
Okay. So the homework for us is these links here at the end of this document.
Yes, yeah, and that's what I could pull together so far. There's a lot more out there, but I think getting a sense of what direction you want to go with regulation and how far is not too far, what kind of things are important for us to identify. Do we care so much about the, say, just an example off the top of my head, species diversity in a forest, or just having more trees? Because I think, you'll get a little bit of pushback either way. It might be something to say if you're too restrictive. It's like our conversation earlier about the application for property owner to come in and do naturalization. Same thing, especially from a land development standpoint. If it's too much, they're going to ask for relief. If it's manageable, you might get a lot of compliance early on to say, yeah, sure, we can, leave a stand of trees, and if it meets this criteria and so forth.
So, the takeaway for us then will be to look at these sample ordinances, come prepared at our next meeting to discuss what we've reviewed. And it sounds like, Chris, you want us to focus on the level of detail we think is appropriate for South Whitehall Township.
Perfect.
Are these too detailed, not detailed enough, right? And then we can, because then reviewing these would then lead into trying to propose some requirements for a South Whitehall Township ordinance.
And I guess regarding that, like if we say we wanted to get something on the books, so we kind of started less restrictive, and then maybe annually slide a few things in there. Like does the process?
It's really tough to get the it's hard to make changes like that every year, because a lot of times when you're cracking open the code, you want to make a substantive and substantial change so that you're not just it's a lot of work with the legal review, with the notice requirements and so forth, to just kind of do it piece by piece. And we've been trying to do some of that, just addressing issues in our codes and older things that need to be updated. And I'll be honest, it hasn't been welcomed with open arms, because it's a lot of work for the board. It has to go through the planning commission, it has to go through the board of commissioners, and it's a lot for them to look at. I think they'd rather see larger sweeping changes than tiny pieces, piecemeal.
Because obviously getting it approved is going to be the biggest part.
Yeah, it could very easily take 4 or 5 months to get something, depending on where it goes and what specifically it is, if it is especially a zoning change.
I think to your point, Derek, we should focus on the things that we think absolutely have to be in there, right? And not make it a wish list of, everything we could possibly think of that we would want to put,
But yeah, no, and I was more thinking the other way of let's start this process. Let's get you can't cut down,
The process is challenging.
An acre property.
Right.
Yeah. My feedback is, if we're going to do something, there's no quick way to do it.
It was just more of we wanted kind of shoot our shot, for lack of a better term, at first. That was all, so
Yeah.
you've answered my question.
I think a good example is, we reviewed the open space definitions probably December or January, and those still aren't into the township code yet. And a lot of that is just finalizing pieces, getting it in through the legal review, getting it into a good time to kind of open up that code and make the change, and then not come back a month later and say, oh, well, we should add this as well.
Just a quick comment here, Chris, on what you have here, the trees. And you said you got this from Chester County?
A lot of it,
This here. This, from my perspective, having done it, a good bit of this is not a big deal,
Mm-hmm.
or seriously.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, protecting trees during construction, people hear that and like, oh, no, not a big deal. I can even tell you how to do it. It's not a big deal.
I found that the more you can give the guidance up front and be very specific and not be vague about protect trees during construction, but if it says, this is what you need to do, and kind of vet that process a little bit before it, gets memorialized in the code.
Right.
But I find that people, because that's the thing, person looking to develop a piece of property, first thing they're doing is looking at our zoning ordinance and then subdivision land development ordinance. If it is too much for them to consider, they're not going to develop that property.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time that they come in and start to, look at going through the development process, they're aware at least and have some sense of, we're willing to do these items.
Mm-hmm. And if they've never done it, and see, that's the problem. That's part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Especially here in the valley, any kind of properties or any type of areas where we saw subdivisions or building was going in, especially back when we first purchased our property in the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, the developer went in, if there were trees on the property, I mean, we saw it. Bulldoze them all into a pile, and now we're gonna burn them.
Mm-hmm.
How ridiculous was this? So we decided to do it differently, and we got help from our county forester.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't difficult. I mean, we took orange fence and we put it around the tree area that we wanted to protect. Nothing heavy could go in there. That was the rule. And you told the people this. If you're gonna clean out the cement, the rest of the cement out of your cement truck, they always have to rinse it out, that tube or whatever. You can't do it here.
Yeah.
And I was there the one day when they delivered the concrete, and I basically told the guy, no, you can't do it here. And he said, you gotta move the truck out there and do it. Because you let them do that, and you get multiple trucks coming in, well, pretty soon you have concrete where you don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it wasn't hard. And then Tim Dugan, who was our forester, he came up to see what we did with the fencing.
Yeah.
And he was like, this is great. He goes, I haven't seen anybody do this, but it wasn't hard.
Yeah.
And
it's not out of line with other regulations that any landowner has to follow. I mean, I think we've come leaps and bounds from erosion and sedimentation controls, and now that's just a part of doing business essentially, and they follow it, and that's regulated by an agency higher than the township. This is just a township regulation.
Yeah. So I think it's great. There's some stuff I would tweak here, but this is great.
Yeah, that's just the general guidance. So what the links in there are, these links at the end here are specific. I'll just open up one. So that takes you directly to the code. This is, here's an example of, this is not, I don't believe, in subdivision land development ordinance or in zoning. This is just conservation of valued woodlands and other vegetation. This is just in their township code, and then there's some good examples here. So look through some of this and take notes, get feedback. And I encourage dialogue throughout. If you guys have questions, email me, email the group, call me. I look at you guys as kind of my sounding board with this. And part of it is I don't have time to go through all of these on my own. So I want to kind of get you all to take the very, very broad approach and filter it down to, okay, Chris, these are the things that we like. Start to dig into the details, and I can work with my team on, here's how we can get that to fit within our existing ordinances.
No, I don't know what they would have said to us. Well, that's a whole different story, but let me put it this way, with the minimal, from my perspective, the minimal amount of work we did, we didn't lose a tree.
Yeah.
Not one tree.
Yeah.
died.
That's great.
Yeah. So it can be done. And we didn't do it. The builder put up the orange fence.
Yeah.
I mean, we just said nothing here, nothing there. Oh, okay, went around, put up the orange fence. So,
All right, so that's homework for each of us, and from now on, the next time we meet is to look at these sample ordinances and kind of develop some ideas about how specific we think we need to be for South Whitehall Township.
Now, are we meeting in June, Chris, or no?
I was going to talk about it
We're
courtesy
doing
of the
this
floor. We can talk about it now if you want, or
Or are we all just meeting to go over this? Are we allowed to do
Yeah.
that or not?
do you want to get through the next agenda item
Oh,
and see
sorry,
what
sorry.
comes out of that?
Sorry,
and then
sorry.
Yeah, because I want to get kind of your.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so community outreach is the next agenda item.
Yeah,
I think you hear Chris.
well, I think it would be great. We have a couple of things coming up now that would be very appropriate for outreach from this group. We talked about Earth Day was a good one. We now have the e-newsletter, which goes out quarterly. So content for that is very easy to adjust and kind of develop. The previous newsletter was a little bit more prescriptive and you had size limitations and the timing was really tough. But with the e-newsletter, it's a shorter sort of runtime so that we can talk about things that are more current, more seasonal, and it's very easy to put content in. So I think starting to think about if this group wants to have some outreach and what that outreach looks like, we can on our end work to give you guys sort of hey, we do a quarterly e-newsletter. It comes out at these times of the year. If you guys want to talk about seasonal related things, get it to me by this time or get me your thoughts and I can work together a narrative. However you want to handle it. We also have summer's coming up. We have lots of events. We'll have movies in the park. We'll have the Sunset to Summer Festival in September. That's going to be our biggest. It's combining a lot of community programs. I think it's combining I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name. The Community Awareness Day, which is put on pretty much by all the emergency response agencies. So they're combining that with the summer concert series, and that's going to be a pretty big event down at Covered Bridge Park. So I think that would be a great one to even have a booth or a table if you guys are interested in that. Like I said, that's September, so to start thinking about that. So I kind of put it here to start thinking about the message from some of this and what are some of the things you guys want to share with the community. What can I do to help? How you want to craft that message? How much do you want to do where it's here are the topics you guys want to go through? Do you want me to craft some of that narrative? Do you guys want to come up with something? So just open for discussion there. The other piece is we talked about a little bit the open space referendum. I'm talking to the Board of Commissioners on Wednesday about which direction we're going with that. If that moves forward, that will be a pretty short run for education and outreach. Obviously, if that moves forward to a potential ballot measure, the ballot measure is in the fall, so summertime is the prime time to kind of get some information to the community about that. So have that in the back of your minds because we also need to see what direction we're going with that from the commissioners and what that message sort of looks like. And what that message looks like coming from the township as well, as opposed to, I think there's going to be hopefully some community interest, but I think there's a level of, because it is a ballot measure, there's a level of, if you vote for this, these are the things that
benefit, sort of, rather than get out and vote. But I'm not an expert in that, so. And that was the other reason I brought the report, the Leaders in the Field report, which is a summary of a lot of those ballot measures in Lehigh Valley from many years ago, probably 6 or 7 more that have come in now. But I felt like some of that was helpful to see the different approaches from the community.
And and how they were successful.
Yes.
That was amazing to me. They did some of the reading, some of those was just great. The
Mhm.
ideas they came up with, and yeah.
There were flyers and
Yeah.
there were other communications. They had people at voting locations on election day, right? So there's a lot of effort, yeah, so, yeah.
There was a lot of effort.
So it sounds to me then, part of the homework should be then maybe, and I don't mind doing it, I can bring it to the next meeting, just a calendar with the dates and the names of all the events that we could potentially
Yes.
touch. Not that we have to do them all, but just like we can pick and choose and then like.
Yeah,
work our
my
calendar.
suggestion would be to focus on the September event. I don't know that we've really coalesced around an agenda yet of what we're trying to accomplish. Well, I mean, you've been, directing us very ably, but I don't know that we've really got much we can talk about yet to people. I would say, we target something for the newsletter that's just who are the EAC, right?
That's a
The
good
fact
idea,
that we
Yeah.
now have an EAC, we're
Right.
active, we're working on some things. And then I think we maybe target the September event to have a physical presence. Because I think by then we'll have a bit more we can say to people. And if we have, if we're going to have a referendum, that would be a good time to start talking to people about it.
And then see what kind of reactions and things we get,
Yeah.
because it's still September. And then if we feel we have to be a little bit more assertive, do we think about going to polling places? Do we think,
Yeah, I would look, if there is going to be a referendum, I would look at that September
Right.
event to be kind of the kickoff of our
Yeah.
campaign.
Yeah.
To try and get the word out about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is, so it's kind of this group is a very nice transitional step. You have, staff working on behalf of the township and the limitation of what we can do. You're kind of my closest interaction to the community, but then you guys are also community members and have so much more than just your involvement here. So I think there's a level of your leadership and the messaging and kind of having the information, but then also sort of mobilizing as residents, as citizens, and that's where, it shouldn't be all on you. And there's only a level that it could be on me and other staff, and then there's only a level it could be on the commissioners and their elected roles, but they're also citizens as well, and so forth. So I think there's having some of the messaging very clear, I think is helpful to mobilize and engage folks.
I mean, some of the messaging in there, I really disagree with, though, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, they were all EITs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they targeted seniors,
Huh.
right? And because seniors won't pay, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they won't be taxed. So I
Yeah.
thought that was a little disingenuous.
Mm-hmm.
And then the arguments about, well, if you have less development, ultimately, down the road, you're going to save on school tax. I didn't buy that argument at all.
That's an interesting one.
I thought that was just total BS.
Really?
Well, I participated in a few studies on that. Now, this township versus a more rural township, I don't have a lot of good information on, but that might be something, depending on what direction you guys want to go with your messaging, if there's information that would be helpful for that, we can certainly look at either bringing in additional speakers or talking about maybe some general studies that we could do at least in-house. To
This
pull
whole
some
idea
information.
that, pay the EIT increase for open space preservation, and down the road, you're going to save on school tax. I don't know. Maybe the data supports that.
Yeah, I don't know about here. I really don't know about here.
The
but
cause and effects seem pretty far removed from one another, in my opinion.
We had some good research on some more rural townships in my previous work that talked about, it was more on the community services because we could estimate some of the community services, less so just the school tax increase
Yeah.
because that has its own level of fluctuation. But and some of the study was on looking at what you're paying now versus what you're paying over time with community services, and it was the investment into protecting, a certain size
Yeah, right.
farm and how that pays off
Mhm.
very quickly within 5 to 10 year range. And once you get to that 5 to 10 year range with the other option, how that just continually increases. But
Well, we're in a township with a school district that's, undergoing a major capital campaign for expansion.
yeah,
They expect increased enrollment, so I think that would be a really hard argument to make here.
Well, I think enrollment's already, I mean, they're
Yeah,
always
right,
behind.
yeah, yeah.
From my hearing, it's like the high school was outsized when they built it.
But I'm saying, pay the open space preservation tax and down the road, you'll be paying less in school tax.
Yeah.
Real estate tax.
you don't want a message that you'll get beat up on
Yeah,
every time
right, yeah.
you bring that.
It might be true, but I just think it's a hard argument to make.
Well, I think too, I mean, you've got older people who are the voters, and
They're the voters.
they're the ones who don't like paying school tax because their kids are gone.
Right.
So it is a great way to manipulate, no offense to anyone.
I'd rather be honest with people.
Come on, I would rather get things passed. You learned nothing from the current administration?
Well, but it's true that there's that sensitivity,
Yeah.
with that group, and every time, that's what you hear. Anytime anything comes up where, you have people in fixed incomes and they're like, I don't even want to hear about it,
Yeah, but look at the library. I mean, that was a disgrace that got
Yes,
voted down.
I know, it did.
And I don't think it was the childbearing age folks that did that.
Right.
Because
So
the
the
dam
message-
funded it.
Yeah, the dam got funded. And then, the dam got funded.
Yeah, but they picked the dam over the library. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why before we got into this, I really want to know where the board
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
sounds, because you got a couple folks who are
Yeah.
for an election this year, and, if they're out there pushing this and saying, this is part of my,
Mhm.
this is part of my platform, I think that's a much different message than if they're like, what tax increase?
Yeah.
Who wants a tax increase?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, it's tough. We're talking about outreach now, and we're still having those conversations. We hope to talk a little bit more at the next BOC meeting, and more after that at the first meeting in June. But time is running out, so I'm glad that we're kind of thinking about this and being prepared to hone in on one direction, depending on what that outcome is.
I think I'll speak for this group and say, if we're gonna go forward with a referendum, you can volunteer the services of this group to help support the
That's
campaign.
wonderful, and I will share that on Wednesday.
I mean, I'm speaking for everybody here, but
I think we're all like.
That's why we're here, I think.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, exactly.
we don't know what that looks like yet, but I think we can commit that we would try to play an active role in trying to support this.
That's excellent. And if everyone's okay with that, I'll share that on Wednesday as we talk about this with the board, and just to say that they're not alone, and that staff is here, and that this committee is here, and that you see that there's a lot of research, a lot of good information, and you just kind of need that.
Yeah, and it's pretty
Slight
clear that, from all the stuff we've shared and talked about, that you need some money to do this, right?
Yeah,
So that's,
Excellent, thank you. And it also sounds like maybe not the calendar of events, but targeting that September date. I will get you all that date to get that on your calendars, and we can start to think about what you want to do there and have there, and what we need for that.
I like that one in particular because, if we have a booth there, we're not sort of a standalone.
No, it'll be
there's a lot
along
of
with
people
all the
out
other.
there,
Yeah,
so,
Yeah, there'll be the
Yeah.
park and recreation tent,
Right,
and
yeah,
then it'll
yeah.
be us, and I'll be there, and that's a big piece of what I can kind of help with, and
I wonder if it's online. Is that September date online on our?
I don't think so, not yet.
Yeah,
I'll
okay.
check. I want to make sure everything is finalize for that, and I'll get some more detail. The newsletter, I love the idea of introducing the EAC. I think if you want to get that, we do have a summer newsletter coming out, but that's soon. But like I said, it doesn't take long to get the content in. Would you guys like to take the time to try to draft something and get it to me, or do you want me to draft something? And I'm talking about in the next week or two. And again, a paragraph or two, just to have something in the e-newsletter that would go out in June. And then we will have the second e-newsletter that'll come out in the fall that can be a little bit more focused if you want to have a more focused message.
So the e-newsletter is different than the print one. This is it's the same as the print one, we're just giving people.
I don't
an
know,
option.
I really don't know what the status of the print
Oh.
one is.
The print one,
Yes.
oh, really?
I don't know how often we're doing it anymore.
It was 2 times a year.
It was 2 times a year. I don't know if it's continuing to stay 2 times a year, but don't quote me on that. I really don't know. I know that the e-newsletter is one that comes up faster, and that we are trying to get information, different types of information, because the print newsletter, it's hard to give I mean, we could recycle the same information for the print one of what is the EAC, but it might not talk about, oh, we have 2 vacancies, and here's what we're doing, and here's some of the things of interest to us, and so forth. It's hard to meet that deadline. I mean, it's a 4-month window to get the print newsletter out, so oftentimes we're behind the information.
It's expensive too.
Very expensive, yes, yeah. So would you guys like me to craft something, or do you guys want to come up with something?
Does it have to be, what do we do, an individual, each doing our own thing, or what are we doing?
Unless you want to,
I don't think it has to be a biography of each one of us. I mean, I
No.
think it's more of a I mean, you're saying like just a few paragraphs, or?
I think 2 paragraphs is plenty. Let me see if I can pull up the Township's e-newsletter from previously. The last one that went out. This is the spring one.
I'm so busy reading the other one, I didn't even know this existed.
So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Tom really goes on, doesn't he? Look.
I think that's the most he's written for this, and we're all so happy that he talked a little bit more. So that's something I did for the survey that went out, so short and sweet. That's what I gave for the transportation plan. The overlay was pretty quick. Oh, this was a good one on open alleys. This is just a quick snapshot. Public Works and events. So here's a good example of what Public Works did that was kind of relevant for the time. A little bit of background on lead and copper, because this came out at the time when they were doing all the lead and copper surveys. Just a graphic in there. So for the EAC, you could essentially have, a standalone spot every quarter if you want to have something in that, up to you, or maybe twice a year, and it could be kind of an EAC spotlight, and do something and add some graphics. And but I think an introduction would be wonderful. I think to let people know, what is the EAC, what do you guys do, what do you focus on, when do you meet, that sort of thing.
I think it's interesting that the EAC wasn't doing anything for how many years? 20? What's it?
Longer, probably 40.
I mean, I think it's really interesting that we are now, and that wasn't. I think that might be something just to note.
We can talk about that, about how it's kind of this dormant board.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a new concept. It's been around for a long time, but there's new life that has been breathed into this, and you guys have this sort of, focus on.
We have a charter, right? So
You have the ordinance.
ordinance, yeah.
Yeah. We never really developed specific bylaws. Kind of wanted to see how much you needed that. I mean, those usually deal with the flow of the meeting.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think if there's source material we could draw from for introductory.
You guys did the work plan. The work plan is kind of the focus, if that's helpful. But in the ordinance, it has the specific duties and responsibilities of this board. Yeah, that's all on here too. If you look at,
All right, I'll take a crack at that and put something together.
yeah, like just
Yeah.
that. But I mean, that's just pulled from the ordinance, so you can kind of make it a little nicer.
I mean, we could do a shout out to ask for 2 new members too. So, you know,
Yeah,
they're
sure,
passionate
yeah.
about, you know, the community.
All right, I'll just put a draft together.
Cool. If you can get me something maybe by midweek next week,
Yeah, okay, no problem.
and then that way I can just make sure with Lynn Matula, Park and Rec manager, that we have time to get it in. I think we should be fine. I think she was targeting mid-June to try to get it out, and it's easy. It's a template.
So we're talking
I'll
this.
put something together, I'll send it to you, I'll copy everybody else, and everybody else can comment on it and draft,
Great.
make any edits you think are
Thank you very much.
appropriate.
But that's the e-newsletter, right, is what we're talking
The
about, not
e-newsletter.
the paper.
I don't know the timeline for the print one.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Are we moving on to courtesy of the floor? Because I want to ask about, what do you guys want to do in June? I am out of state, but we do have the meeting advertised. I could see about trying to get someone to come and run the meeting. I could potentially join online. There's a lot that you guys can also do without having the formal meeting. I mean, a lot of our meeting gets to discussion. There's nothing to prevent discussion. There's no decisions being made at that point. And I also welcome a lot of feedback between now and then with all the things that we went over, questions about ordinances and so forth. And I can work on a lot of this in preparation for future meetings. I look at these meetings as the decision-making points, or the public-facing kind of, here's what we've been working on, here's kind of, we're sharing it, we're, speakers and so forth. So thoughts on June, given kind of the homework and everything, and do you guys want to have the formal meeting to definitely have it? And if so, I can try to work on getting someone here for a replacement.
Could we meet here without it being a formal meeting?
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
And do some work, I mean, just.
I mean, can we at least like kind of get a consensus on our
I
thoughts?
mean, we'll all have
Yeah, I
looked at
think it's-
these
And then-
ordinances, and I think it'd be good for us to have a conversation about what we're thinking.
Well,
If not,
then we-
I
on
can,
that particular day, or you're saying you just want to meet somewhere?
I'm
to
happy to open up my house to.
I was gonna say, you can go to the
meet at my
library.
house.
The doors close at 4, so that's the only thing.
Oh, okay, you don't have the meeting, okay.
Yeah, if we don't have the meeting, you can't come in.
We can absolutely meet at my house. I live right up the road. I mean, 2 of you have already been to my house, so I mean, it's,
Meet at this,
we can
meet
think
at the regular meeting time, but have it.
or earlier, or whatever you want,
I like regular meeting time.
Yeah, I kind of
can't
do
do
too,
earlier
it's like
anymore.
dinner's over and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, it's too much.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, if we just want to keep it same time, same date. Oh wait, do we have a date?
Yeah,
June, it's
yeah,
already
yeah,
out there, yeah.
yeah.
So same time, same date, but just my house. I mean, it's up to you. I mean, certainly don't decide now, but I'm,
Well, it's generous of you, I mean, if you want to do that, that sounds fine.
okay.
I just need to know where you live.
And so that would be to kind of continue to work on all this stuff, and then with the hope that we get. I'm just wondering, what do you want from me between now and that time?
Enjoy your trip.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
I think
helpful.
until we look at these.
Yeah,
That's what I was
sample
thinking.
ordinances,
Yeah,
I don't think
there's-
we know what we want to do, right?
Okay.
So the purpose of meeting next month would be to just kind of say, we've looked at these, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah.
Where should we go with this?
Mhm. And then come back in July and say,
Yeah.
here's kind of our thoughts on it and so forth, right? You could probably even send that to me if you can get some notes on it
Yeah.
for something for me to work on in anticipation of the July meeting, to maybe come in with something to look at.
Okay, yeah, we'll see how far we get.
yeah.
I'm excited to have a directive and have homework. I'm really excited about that.
I'm glad. It helps me too. It's enough on my plate.
Well, good, I'm glad.
But everybody keep it.
Yeah.
Get on the calendar.
Cancel, not cancel.
Whatever you don't turn off like the calendar that syncs to my phone, because I will not show up.
Yeah.
there.
And somebody should let Mark know, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Do you want to send someone out or whoever, however you guys want to send
Sarah,
it?
why don't you send something out and let us know where you live and,
Mhm. I'll do it on the group.
you know.
Email, that's
Yeah,
all right.
Right, yeah.
And then maybe just make sure you spell out our homework for Mark.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll have this stuff wrapped up by midweek, and I'll send out the recording and the notes and everything for you guys and for Mark.
Okay.
And then that way you have it all kind of right there.
Send a
So
meeting.
it sounds like we can make a motion to adjourn. So I make a motion to adjourn. Anyone second?
I'll say.
Go ahead, either one or the other.
Okay.
Well, thank you for